I have put in place just a handful or more slides on what we think of as the conversational UI, or certainly what you might think of as AI in general, and kind of what that might do just to storytelling in general, because it can't be the same as yesterday, and we might not know exactly what it will look like tomorrow, but we can perhaps make a set of assumptions. And we've now spent the last 5 years working on these two unique autonomous agents called Amy and Andrew, and I'll kind of go into detail on exactly what they do, some of the struggles that we've had in building them, and certainly some of the things that I can myself imagine happen in the future. And this is certainly not gospel, and I'll try to go through it at a certain pace so you can take notes and come to the very end of it immediately call bullshit, and we'll kind of try to solve for that in the Q&A, or immediately say, this part I might see happen, but I just don't see it happen in the next coming years, and you can get my arguments for why I think it might happen sooner rather than later. Flip to slide 2 here. This is not how I talk. This is how I talk when I can't see anything on the other side. What you see here is a slide that doesn't really mean much, but I want you to kind of imagine this particular scenario, which is real, right? For where I have to go to San Francisco next week, and as I go to San Francisco, I'll end up at the Hilton. It'll be 11 p.m. trying to kind of prepare for the next day, and the whole reason that I'm out on the West Coast, and I'll have the urge for a Diet Coke. My mom used to work at Coca-Cola, so there's no escaping this, as in I'm in this for the remainder of my life, for better or worse. And I think as I have that Diet Coke need, and you'll have other needs as you sit in other hotel rooms across the world, my first line of thought is not one of, you know what? Let me go to the App Store. Let me see if Hilton doesn't have some sort of app. Let me find one of the many apps they have in the App Store and believe that that is the one particular app which I need to kind of go install. I'll click install. It'll take me X amount of kind of minutes, seconds to kind of install it. And upon installing it, let me open it up. I need a set of credentials to kind of register and be a member. I don't have their silly Hilton points, and I don't really care, but hey, let me set up a new account and a new password, which I can probably not remember an hour from now. Having done that, then let me log in. Once logged in, let me see if they have a store. When I find the store, let me search for Diet Coke. When I find the Diet Coke, let me add it to basket. When I'm in basket, let me kind of click checkout. At checkout, let me add my kind of credit card details. And let me see if I can't get a Diet Coke. As in, that whole story just doesn't make any sense. As in, that is just a really shitty UI for that particular pain, for where I'm just sitting there in my underwear in some random hotel in San Francisco with the need of a Diet Coke, which is why whatever other UI they put in place still works way better than the idea of the app, which is that there's a phone and there's a button that says room service. I pick it up, I click room service, and I scream Diet Coke, and the dude on the other end will just say, so I assume you want a Diet Coke? Yeah, that would be lovely. And I hang up. Now, that's a great UI. As in, if anything, that's the conversational UI, but delivered in some sort of technical channel which is not super optimized, but it works well. As in, my need is just so, at least in my mind, simple to express that I'm confused that I can't even just have an Alexa in the corner of that hotel room and just kind of sit there, close my eyes, and just kind of say, hey, Diet Coke, please. And then magically, 5 minutes later, somebody come knocking on my door. Hey, here's the Diet Coke you kind of asked for. And that particular setting is one for where I am confused, really, if you ask me, about many of those apps in the App Store today, for where they kind of thought that the app was the solution. And even if you just kind of take a couple of steps back and think, somehow plenty of brands, plenty of kind of good companies, plenty of kind of agencies get to the conclusion that there's a pain, and I now have to invent some app that can either remove the pain or at least alleviate the pain to some extent. But it seems to kind of rest on the idea that the app must be a participant. And I think the app really, again, if you want to take another set of steps back, is just one UI paradigm of many UI paradigms that we've experienced, right? Sadly, I'm getting older, so I certainly have a memory of taking my CS degree on the command line, which, if anything, was perhaps one of the more distinct UIs that we got introduced to, and it was so distinct that you kind of needed a degree to get access to compute, to kind of manage that command line, and there was a very specific syntax, and if you couldn't figure out the syntax, you didn't get access to any compute. Then at a later point, you would see that we would get the graphical user interface, and with little education, you could have my mom get access to a word processor, the spreadsheet, and so on and so forth, and a whole host of office workers and just consumers in general got access to compute. And certainly the app, or the kind of mobile UI, if that's what you want to call it, is a distinct UI in its own right, and it certainly deserves its place. And it's not that I don't love my little device here. I think it's fantastic, but I don't think it's the answer to everything. I think every UI is the answer to some problems. As in, to this day, what is it? August 30th, 2018, my backend engineers are still managing our service on the command line because that particular UI is just a good way to solve for that pain. Certainly, most of my UI and UX folks, for whatever kind of visual elements we have in our company, are served well on the traditional big-ass desktop and the graphical user interface, and plenty of things on our customer end, if they want to manage their preferences on the go, kind of well managed inside some sort of app or certainly kind of mobile website. But I also think we just have to accept that there's a whole new set of problems, or perhaps even more interesting, a host of the existing problems that we try to solve in prior UI paradigms that are now moving into this new UI paradigm, the conversational UI. And it doesn't take much exploration, even just as you go through the 100 or so some apps you have installed on your phone right now, for where if you really just spend a few minutes thinking about each one of them, does it really belong here? As in, is that the best way to solve it? That just completely fascinates me. And I've certainly bet the last 5 years of my life on the world moving towards some sort of setting for where this will just be required in many settings, and some software can only exist in this kind of conversational UI type of setting. And this kind of setting is certainly one for where there's a perhaps very dramatic change in how we perceive just software in general. And I know I might go all geek on you now, and I can imagine kind of 4 people going to the loo already as we're speaking. But hear me out. Up until this point, certainly software was something for where in almost all instances, you would use software to do a task a little bit faster and a little bit more accurate. Some version of that. And there might be this moment here for where with the conversational UI, that expectation will change, for where if I go do a new financial model for the year 2019 for my investors and that kind of September board meeting, there'll be no point in that presentation in that September board meeting for where I'll say, hey, by the way, I've done some work, my VP of Finance has done some work, but I would also like to kind of give some credit to Microsoft Excel. That doesn't make any sense. That's a retarded comment. As in, I won't give Excel any credit. I said, that was just a tool. I will take all the credit together with my VP of Finance. but things might just flip, because in the conversational UI, I might certainly, in many cases, want a task done, but many times what I want is a job done, a job that will consist of multiple tasks. And what I will describe is an objective where I'm actually not even entirely sure of how many steps it will take to solve for this. As in, if I want a Diet Coke in that particular hotel room, I'm actually not sure what goes into that. All I know is that I say Diet Coke, I close my eyes, 5 minutes later, I wake up and there's a Diet Coke in my hand. You fucking figure out how to get it here. As in, I don't know whether it's the downstairs lobby, is it the guys in the restaurant? Do we need somebody to come up with it? Just do what I told you. And that will flip things around for where you'll start to describe objectives and not just small tasks. And when you describe objectives, you make the assumption that the agents that take in those objectives will have, to some degree, full autonomy to go do things which you don't participate in. That is exciting. That is a real change. Now, to get slightly more kind of tactical, I said, yeah, Dennis, I hear you. This is all good and fine, and your version of the future might or might not happen, and I'm not sure I kind of completely kind of follow you. Tell me, what does this look like today? And I'm biased, so have that in mind. So I've used kind of what we do as an example here. So I think it's fucking awesome, but I think the story is still true. So if you kind of look at, I'll look slightly to the left now. If you kind of look at this slide here, what you see is some traditional request that you probably even have a version of this in your inbox as we speak, right? You receive some email that rhymes with, hey, Michael, good to talk to you yesterday. Do you have time to meet up later today, tomorrow, or perhaps early next week? I'm free most days after 1 p.m. This is just one type of task, really, right? That arrive, there's this individual which you met up with who is now eager to kind of figure out at some moment in the future where we might be able to kind of speak in person. And it's now up to you to kind of solve it. And by the way, the only way to kind of escape this up until this point, and I'm now 25 years into the use of the email, and really this request haven't changed over the last 25 years. And the only way you could kind of escape this particular pain was if you kind of won the corporate lottery, right? You became SVP of Flim Flam at Time Inc. and 52 years old, and you got a human assistant called Tom, and whenever you want something done, you can just ask Tom, hey, you go figure this out, because I'm too expensive to kind of deal with it. But that is a luxury that is disappearing at a rapid rate. And you and me, really, we're on our own for many of these things. But look at this request again here. If you're really honest, and if I'm slightly rude, and I'll tone down the swear words, but look at this request here. This is not an email. This is a fucking riddle. You want me to solve your little riddle here for where later today, tomorrow, perhaps early next week, most days after 1 p.m., as in you want me to kind of solve your riddle, look at my calendar, somehow figure out from what you describe, when does that match into some version of my calendar for next week or the week thereafter. I think the best response would be that kind of version of Tom that I alluded to, which is your decision really is only one of, do I want to meet up with this individual? If you do, cool, make it happen. But you certainly shouldn't spend your time and energy in trying to kind of do the email ping pong back and forth about whether he can do next Wednesday at 2 p.m. at 200 Broadway. It should just be one for where, yeah, I'm up for that. I have CC'd in Amy, and she can help put something on my calendar. And that is the awesome part. I said, you are now at a moment in time for where you are able to kind of tell the agent that you want to meet up. It can understand what you asked it to do. And then It will take you out of the conversation, reach out to one or more participants, and have this kind of very natural, human-like back and forth, just like if you hired a human individual to do this particular task. Now, that is, I think, a new era, because as soon as you click send to this email, you also click archive, and you don't see anything. A day and a half later, once the agent has negotiated with the participant, that comes to conclusion. And that is a change. That is a change in how we work. And you shouldn't just think of it as me and my team of 100 propeller heads who spent the last short of 5 years trying to kind of solve this, but you think of 1,000 agents like this on a ton of little chores that will arrive. But what is also interesting, I think, for our conversation today is once this idea of kind of invisible software, which you can't touch, there is no kind of canvas, there'll be a new setting to kind of design for, right? And when we kind of design for that setting, interruptions are kind of rude. Today, we can kind of semi-interrupt people, right? In a way for where if I look at a web page, there's room to kind of interrupt. If I read a paper, there's kind of room to interrupt. If I have a piece of software, there's room to kind of advocate for other features. There's plenty of space for where I can still allow you to do what you're supposed to do, or kind of make sure that the utility is not handicapped by you kind of trying to tell other stories at the same time. But in the conversational UI, that becomes very visible. As in, as I said, almost rude if you try to interrupt. If I ask Alexa what the time is in Sydney right now, anything but you telling me the time in Sydney is just not the relationship I'm looking for. So you do that. But if that is the case, and we are moving to this new setting, as in it will be massively conversational in the not too distant future, how do we kind of meet new customers in this setting if we're not allowed to interrupt? That I find kind of interesting. I think there'll be plenty of software where this question doesn't even matter, as in I'm there for the raw utility, I'm willing to pay for it, and if I need to pay $8 for an agent like Amy, so be it. But there's certainly other settings for where I won't pay anything. So there needs to be some sort of mechanism for where you are allowed to inject some other message. And I think, and I'm not suggesting I'm right here, that the one way we find a way to kind of speak to people outside of the raw utility is not as obvious. And I think it could be kind of in two ways. One, we speak through data, meaning that the results you get from these services will be kind of opaque. So if I ask for a Diet Coke at that Hilton Hotel in San Francisco next week, they might just have a set of data for where they will know they don't have any more Diet Cokes, and they might have a decision-making mechanism that just provides me a Diet Pepsi. That might not work for me, but there might certainly be something where the data will somehow be a backdrop for what will kind of happen when people ask these questions. And the way we kind of end up speaking to our customers is either in the kind of breadth of the data which we have, and number two, in the models that we provide. As in, even today, we see this throughout many of the services we have on other kind of UI paradigms, which is that we see recommendations everywhere. We actually heavily manipulate it into many decisions every single day, but it will become even more important in these settings here for where I'm running out of something at home and I'm asking the Alexa to kind of add it to my basket, say batteries. You know what? I don't have any kind of love relationship with some battery brand, or perhaps I do, but there'll certainly be some sort of recommendation engine that will add a particular set of batteries to my basket. So I think the way we could end up speaking, or the way we should think about speaking to our customers in the not too distant future inside the conversational UI will be in a data setting and really have a strong idea of what data do we provide and how do we craft that data set and maintain it and inject ideas into it. And two, how can we make sure that we are a participant in the recommendations that are being made? Because if we're not, somebody else will make a recommendation where my success depends on his recommendation. I can't just accept that. I either have to kind of make sure I provide the recommendation, I write the models on my data set, or I'm at the complete mercy of somebody else. That was the somewhat rapid story of certainly some of the things that I've been thinking about over the last kind of 5 years as we've tried to kind of build these 2 fully autonomous agents that can schedule meetings on your behalf. And I will be very happy to kind of have any one of you kind of challenge me on any one of these items, because I'm certainly not suggesting that I'm right, but it's a set of thoughts where me and the team spend hours on end trying to kind of figure out what it will look like tomorrow and the days thereafter. So thank you very much for listening. And I'm hoping I'm still speaking to somebody and not just kind of the internet in general. Cheers.
I think we are creative. I love it. So doing questions with text and audio on my end. Question is, what is the next application of AI? I can imagine certainly a set of phases. So certainly imagine a first phase for where you'll see a whole host of those apps that just don't belong in the App Store being transferred into this kind of new UI paradigm, the conversational UI. And most of the applications, once they arrive in that UI paradigm, will come with some level of intelligence. As in, I will just assume that given the setting, that I can ask it to do little jobs, mostly just chores that you can find in your inbox. That is a good first wave. And you can see little silly things arrive in the Amazon Alexa skill store, but you should imagine kind of tens of thousands of kind of tries, and that will be that first wave. Plenty of kind of small, tiny agents that do little jobs for you. Then I think the next wave is one for where we start to figure out some way of allowing these individual agents to talk to each other. Meaning that we are 130 people all in all, and we spent now short of 5 years trying to get one agent just to negotiate, to set up a meeting. So imagine the kind of complexity. And then you can imagine somebody else solve travel, somebody else will solve company receipts so you can get reimbursed faster and easier, and so on and so forth. But then if we allow them to kind of speak to each other, that Amy would have set up the meeting with that customer in Miami, and now the meeting is being pushed to 7 p.m. Amy can see that that is just a little bit too late. Let me reach out to your travel agent, and the travel agent will see that then you can't get back to New York in time. We need to kind of rebook that for tomorrow morning. The travel agent will kind of rebook that for tomorrow morning, knowing that you have to stay overnight. We'll reach out to your hotel agent, who will now kind of book a room for you. Having booked a room, the hotel agent will know that there was a cost that came along with that. Let me reach out to your kind of bookkeeping agent. We'll take a note and make sure that you get reimbursed. And there'll be kind of a cascading set of agents that will work on things because one thing happened. That will be the kind of, I think, second wave. And then I think the kind of third wave is this kind of idea of perhaps the organization being flipped on its head. So today you kind of have this silly setting for where the CEO is supposed to be at the top and have the best ideas and stupid shit like that. What might actually be awesome is this new setting for where the answer, given we have all these agents, isn't worth much, but the question is worth a lot. And let me just explain that. This kind of really excites me, which is that today, say I run some sort of ad campaign and we ran it on the East Coast, and I go speak to my analyst, hey, that kind of AdWords campaign we ran for this particular segment for the last 3 weeks, did that convert to kind of the degree we had hoped for? Oh, I did. How does that compare to what we do on the West Coast? And he'll spend hours on end in trying to kind of extract those segments and kind of compare them. I'll give him credit for all the work, but the work itself is probably not worth much. The answer is. And that is interesting. That means if all that work comes cheap, as in you have some sort of analytics agent, you can just ask questions willy-nilly, then perhaps the frontline workers, people in service and support and account managers and what have you, who actually have nothing between them and the customer, will have all the best questions. And all of a sudden, well, most of the power in the organization because they know what to ask. That kind of excites me. This might all be kind of crazy talk, but those are the three kind of steps. Plenty of agents arrive. The agents start to talk to each other. Once we have unlimited access to answers, questions will matter. Once questions matters the most, the frontline workers will kind of win. That was a very long answer. What do you think the biggest misconception by the public about AI is? I think there is this idea by those not in tech that we're about to receive some sort of press release from Google starting with, ta-da, we solved it. Any question which you have, we got the answer. Any job which you can imagine, we're able to do that job. Some superhuman. I see no indication that we're moving in that direction. As in, I find it just not plausible at all. As in, I can't even imagine in my lifetime that we end up with this AGI that will be like Dennis, just in a machine setting. I do imagine we'll have tons of machine intelligence, but there is no human-like single entity on the roadmap in any setting in the kind of tech industry. And I can barely imagine it in my lifetime. That, I think, is a misconception. What people then also don't see is all of the kind of invisible settings for where a lot of intelligence is being applied, but it just disappears. So when you try to kind of dramatically brake for some obstacle in your car, what used to be kind of all mechanical is now all software. The amount of intelligence put into that to make sure that you don't crash is just amazing, but it disappears and the public doesn't see it. The cooling that happens in your data center is not a dude running to the southeast wall fiddling with some kind of thermostat. That is all software, and that disappears. So I certainly think the misconception is that they hope for the all-knowing being to arrive and then don't see all the progress that is already happening. Second question, is there any difference between Amy and Andrew? Let me first take a step back, which is this idea that some people on the internet, and I'm sure you can imagine, who push back on us having given our agents gender. So first of all, we've provided two genders, so the choice is on you to pick Amy or Andrew, and there's no difference between them. They speak exactly the same and do exactly the same job. And if I'm really honest, just between geek and geeks, we actually just did it because what do you do if your name is Andrew or if your name is Amy? You can't. That'll be odd that your assistant's got the same name as you. So we initially just wanted to make sure that, hey, we need to make sure that you can flip if our agent's name is the same as your name. But really, I just don't see any value in trying to come up with either a gender neutral name or in trying to come up with a machine name of some sort for where you don't even want to suggest that it's human or human-like, it just seems like a cop-out to me, as in, when you provide a gender-neutral name, really what you've done is just to push the burden onto your customer, and you might not have applied any gender, but they will certainly pick up a gender, and in their mind, there is one. So that seems like you just not wanting to kind of deal with it. In the kind of machine setting, I like the fact that when we talk about the conversational UI, we've reached a moment in time for where we're saying that the human now does not have to adapt to the machine, as in you don't have to adapt to whatever syntax we put in place or whatever set of menu items that Adobe put in front of you, which you have to learn. We flipped it around, and the machine now have to adapt to you. And by humanizing it, I think we are underlining that fact that now we flipped it. So I'm just leaning into that. And perhaps I'm really just answering another question because I've been given so much shit for actually giving them gender, but I think it's the right thing to do to truly kind of democratize access and tell people who are just not tech savvy that, hey, don't worry about it. Just write back in your funny Danish English and say, I can't do this week, but how about I pop by the office at some point in next week at some afternoon. That is all you have to do. Time well spent. I give us 5 out of 5 stars for grit in just making this work with all of the technical kind of challenges. And I think that kind of suggests that we haven't kind of fully solved all of our kind of software issues just yet. Thanks so much for listening. Really appreciate it. You have a great day. Cheers.